Welcome to the Blended Learning as an Instructional Strategy to Improve Academic Performance session. I will now turn over the microphone to our presenter.
Well, I'm Captain Debra-Dreana Marshall-Stuart, and I am presenting my research paper on blended learning that was used as an instructional strategy to improve academic performance. And I'm basically going to focus on the Caribbean experience. I'm just going to get right into navigating the slide. Good. So, as mandated by the Educational Board in Barbados, which is similar throughout the Caribbean, the mandate was that the Sam Jack College will now be required to promote a learner-centered curriculum. And the purpose of this new curriculum was to encourage new teaching and to revise the different types of grading methods used within a technical and vocational tertiary institution with the aim of positioning the student as the focus of the learning process. As a step to increase student academic achievement, the institution was directed to highlight the use of blended learning technologies to guide student learning across the curriculum. Blended learning, therefore, was the initiative used to handle these conditions. However, during the implementation, the program objectives began to change slightly. These changes were due to the organizational structure of the college, the type of courses and programs that the college offered, and the quality of students that were presently at the college and which differed in learning abilities across each division. In evaluating the effectiveness of the blended learning programs, the administration of the Sam Jack College considered program indicators that also relate to the organizational structure, also relate to the school community and to the program outcomes. Other organizational indicators included the monetary outcomes, the school leadership, and governance of the institution, as well as the school community outcomes, and those program indicators that will impact on student engagement, student performance, and student achievement. Other program indicators included the processes and the practices used by teachers during the delivery of the blended learning program at the institution. And it's these program indicators that played a critical role in determining whether the program objectives were met, and hence the problems began. When the Sam Jack College implemented the blended learning approach to improve student performance and achievement, the program was designed to address issues related to the low levels of student success and performance outcomes at the institution. And they felt that by providing an online student-centered approach, that this would have improved the level of performance among the students. In addition to facilitating blended learning, the teacher's roles in managing the teaching and learning processes consisted of organizing course content and other course activities. They noted that there were similar issues across the Caribbean that was being faced by Sam Jack College as the tertiary institution began to implement blended learning. Some of the issues that they realized that were common, for example, included the unexpected impact on workload, the changing roles of teachers, the quality of training required for the teachers to implement blended learning programs, as well as the teacher's performance as well during the whole blended learning environment. Findings from my study show that technological issues, problems with bandwidth, and the use of faculty use of and their experience in working with e-learning technologies also hampered the successful implementation of the SJC's blended learning program. So this study allowed for an investigation of the processes and practices, which before I would have indicated was a critical indicator. These processes that were used to increase student success rates in a new blended learning environment. So traditionally, the college technical and vocational focus on face-to-face teaching. A lot of the work that they would have done would have been practical demonstration, etc. So you were now asking instructors to move from courses that depend on the face-to-face interaction into a blended learning program. So as I began the study and tried to look at the problem, I considered the strategies that faculty employed during the process of moving from the traditional types of teaching or learning into the blended learning, instruction, and assessment. I also explored how teachers incorporated technology with face-to-face instruction to create or to improve student learning outcomes. One of the recommendations that was heard at this time from the different educational institutions in the Caribbean is that when we consider blended learning as a cure-all or as a remedy to address our educational problems, that we also need to address how effective the implementation of programs such as blended learning would be for any particular institution. And again, this is within the Caribbean context where we have issues with poor internet connectivity, lower bandwidth, and technology just being introduced into our teaching and learning within the last 4 or 5 years. The social constructivist approach was used with this study, and this allowed for the examination of how learners were presented with materials to follow up on their performance. The social constructivists consider the types of tools that are used by teachers to regulate their learners' online presence and their usefulness to the course. In alignment with the tenets of this theory, my interview questions for this study give teachers the opportunity to reflect on their active involvement in the blended learning process. As well, participants were able to consider the types of learning opportunities they offer to the student in order to achieve the learning objectives. And again, this is through reflection, critical thinking, and creativity. So I would have now discussed my problem statement and my theory of framework, and I will now move on to the implementations for business or information technology. It is here that we look at the individual differences, where we look at the teacher's prior experiences with IT, their prior technology knowledge, the ability to gain confidence in using new technologies, something as simple as being able to use the computer not only for their administrative duties, but now for teaching and learning, the ability to access information on the internet, on the World Wide Web, the ability to access the learning management systems. So all of these things were taken into consideration, as they would have indeed affect the rate of learning, not only of the students, but of the instructors who were now being introduced to teaching online. So the continuous ICT skills training, we realized then, would have been fundamental. And we also noticed that even with a highly qualified and experienced faculty in their expert areas, many of these persons fell short in their technological skills. So coming out of there, we realized that within the Caribbean, the whole idea of providing training to faculty members as before actually implementing blended learning was needed so that we will have been able to address the instructors' various needs for ICT, their needs for understanding e-learning development, and of course, then it would have prepared them to have the appropriate training and with the technology. Therefore, we realized that there should have been further professional development opportunities for our teachers. Also, there should be more opportunities to allow teachers to understand the differences with e-learning versus face-to-face teaching. Bearing this in mind, one of the recommendations that would have been made is that training should be provided to faculty members to address their varying needs for ICT, as well as for working in a blended learning environment. There was also a need for appropriate technological orientation to the online platform, and this would have been considered for both the teacher and the student, and also the need to provide learning opportunities in terms of instructional designing for courses. It is necessary also to consider how blended learning was introduced, and at the SJC, what should have happened is that it should have begun with the faculty at the low end of the technology continuum, and at the most appropriate time, move them forward in such a manner that they can grasp and build confidence to navigate the Web 2.0 technologies that were required in the classroom. So to continue to develop the knowledge of blended learning in higher education in the Caribbean, research was needed to investigate the challenges. And these challenges again relates to technical and vocational institute and how blended learning would have been implemented and supported. The proposed research topic considered was, what is the impact of the technology integration on student engagement in post-secondary classrooms? And the research questions related to the students' level of engagement when technology was integrated in the classroom versus the engagement in a traditional classroom. In so doing, the research was able to offer solutions that assisted and will assist future TVET colleges in the Caribbean as they go about implementing educational reforms such as blended learning or e-learning. It also allows for strategies that will allow policymakers to think about and to make more informed decisions as they look at this kind of transformation, especially now in the light of our COVID environment. So this research now, although it was done a few years ago, is even now more significant as the opportunities and challenges that are currently emerging due to the implementation of blended learning still continues to be a need to be further explored, and especially in the context of student engagement. So I now take a look at the literature review. Okay, so the literature addressed the benefits, the barriers, the challenges associated with implementing blended learning into the teaching and learning with a focus for the Caribbean, as well as a focus for vocational studies, the type of institutions that have predominantly face-to-face instruction in terms of a lot of practical hands-on skills training. And these types of institutions are prominent again throughout the country, Barbados, as well as throughout the Caribbean. So I was able to examine other studies which focus on challenges teachers encountered while using blended learning as a strategy for improving student performance, student engagement, and student achievement. All of this was seen by the stakeholders as critical so that they can understand the best practices that the teachers will need to implement going forward, so that at some stage in time, they can view their blended learning program as being successful. So the evidence in literature concluded was that a modest transfer from face-to-face to blended learning does not always mean good pedagogy. Therefore, teachers must learn to blend their practices correctly. The literature further suggested that to achieve this type of success, teachers will have to look at the entire curriculum as opposed to tacking on or simply weaving through various approaches. Blended learning as well was deemed as a teaching approach that should be focused on personalized learning and on engagement of learners. It was also seen as being there as a tool to assist in promoting online assessments with regular feedback. And these are things that were not evident at SJC's as part of their blended learning program. Throughout the literature, most of the authors were of having learning activities that move from within the walls of the classroom to take place online through the use of technology media or through a LMS. And again, at SJC, many instructors had difficulty in understanding how to move their predominantly face-to-face or skills training session into an online environment. The literature concluded that by interacting in both environments, the majority of students would have experienced a social and teaching presence if it was effectively implemented. If blended learning was effectively implemented, the students would have received that sort of experience that speaks to constructivism, and they would have received a teaching experience that will allow them to be able to, let's say, increase their academic performance. So in looking at the research questions and the type of study, the study was a qualitative project study which addressed the processes and practices used by teachers in a blended learning environment to increase student success and student performance. The case study approach allowed for stakeholders to better understand how blended learning, how that particular model would have impacted students' performance at the college. I would have chosen this method in order to provide for more exploration and to allow instructors to engage in deep and vivid reflections of the situation. So as part of the interviewing process, they too, as well as the stakeholders, will be able to have a clear understanding of the phenomenon which was under study. As well, it was important that I was able to explore the case through interviews, the use of reports. There were some other reports that were evaluation reports that I was able to review, and then as well from observation from the data collection. The research was concerned with an examination of a bounded case, specifically an instance of blended learning education as represented by a single program designed to improve student performance. The study included 8 teachers who participated in the blended learning initiative. Purposeful sampling was used to select the teaching staff at the college, and I aim at selecting those teachers who understood the curriculum, who understood the approach that the college was trying to make in terms of using blended learning as a new instructional strategy. From this group, teachers who were able to use the online collaborative tools such as the discussion forums, who used the assessment tools such as the quizzes and the evaluation tools such as the gradebook, those persons were chosen to participate in a study. Evaluation reports on the teacher's use of Moodle during the blended learning implementation further provided the necessary details to identify 2 instructors from within each department. So I was able to have persons from maybe human ecology, business studies, carpentry and masonry, housekeeping, commerce, different divisions that are made up of persons who had predominantly face-to-face classes, technical and vocational classes, skills training classes, and a few who had fully academic classes that were theory focused. So through formal interviews and informal communication, I was able to obtain participants' perception of the blended learning program and how it impacted their students' achievement. I was able to probe teachers who participated in the program on the types of practices and the kinds of processes that they would have used to encourage student learning. The interviews standardized open-ended approach, and it also used a structured scheduling instrument to collect data. One of the advantages of using the interviews as the data collection method is that it was flexible and it afforded me the opportunity to ask respondents for clarification or for confirmation on anything that was said. The interviews also allowed me to gather descriptive data from their perspective, and it was able to advance insights to how they interpreted the phenomenon on the study as well. In analyzing the data, the steps involve preparing, organizing, and interpreting the interview data. By typing and reading the interview response, and by comparing the responses to the information provided in other reports, etc., I was able to get a better understanding of the data as it emerged. The process of corroborating evidence from the interviews and from previous performance evaluations and other documents that were shared with me enhanced the accuracy of the research. I was also able to engage in triangulation. So follow-up interviews were done with participants. We met, we reviewed the transcript to ensure accuracy. We also performed member check-in to make sure that everything conformed. And this member check-in interview allowed teachers again to ask questions as they went about checking the transcript to ensure that, again, everything had presented was an accurate representation of their thoughts. From there, the themes that emerge include student engagement, student success, pedagogical challenges, technological challenges, and teacher professional development. So as we move into the findings now, we will see that the findings show that while faculty appreciated the added flexibility of the learning environment, they noted that the challenges facing in developing their courses for the online environment, and these challenges included having minimal time, minimal resources and support that was required for an effective course design. Challenges also included gaining new technology skills in an effort to ensure that once the instructors do go online, that they were able to navigate the LMS. And they also included the risk that was connected to developing a technical and vocational course and moving that TVET course into a blended format. So considering how these inescapable internal issues batter the institution, the need for assistance in instructional designing and course development came out as being essential for the faculty if they are to provide an environment that will stimulate reflection, critical thinking, collaboration, and ultimately student achievement. Blended learning at the institution was introduced, as I would have said before, at the low end. So now there's a need to take it a step further. And as the findings would have shown, there's a need not only for the use of more relevant technology, but training in using those types of technology in order to improve the teaching and learning, because the improper use of the technology created unfavorable consequences. So research would have suggested that a framework for institutional implementation of blended learning should have begun at the awareness exploration stage, then move into adoption or early implementation stages, and ended with the mature implementation or growth stage. So this framework would have identified the critical structure and the support issues that were needed to be addressed at each stage of the ICT training and implementation, even with those instructors who indicated that they had prior experience or believed that they were well versed in online learning. Introducing selected learning technologies to teachers based on their levels of experience in ICT should have been done in such a manner that the individual differences, their prior technological experience, their learning confidence, and their ability to access the LMS and navigate the LMS, share that information with the student, assist students who were having difficulty or similar challenges. It was clear that that was needed and that it will continue to affect the rate of learning at the college within their student body if the instructors are not put in a position to be able to overcome these deterrents. So as a result, it was concluded that there should be a professional development program where teachers will be provided with opportunities for engaging in a practical application of e-learning as well as knowledge sharing. So we're going to move on now and look at how this would have been, these recommendations would have been interpreted and put in place. So the practices and processes of the teachers' interview showed great similarities regarding their use of blended learning as an instructional strategy to improve student performance. Unlike the universal definitions of blended learning, the college model promoted the integration of digital tools in the face-to-face environment, but was negligent in using the online environment for teaching and learning. The participants in this study defined blended learning as the combination of face-to-face instruction supported by distributed educational materials using a learning management system. It was clear from this that the Samjak College would have created a learning environment in which teachers were required to lead the transition to a blended learning model that integrates a learning management system with high quality instruction that would have driven student performance to a higher level. However, when the college embarked on this ambitious blended learning curriculum reform, it quickly became evident that before teaching could begin in the online environment, teachers will require training. The findings of this study reveal that training was also needed to introduce teachers to the pedagogy associated with teaching and learning in an online environment. Research also found that teachers changing roles into blended learning teachers require training regarding the use of ICT in the classroom, and that the absence of this training created challenges for successful implementation of the blended learning program. This finding led to a teachers professional development program, which was geared towards finding solutions for each of the challenges aforementioned. The primary goal of the program then was to create a similar environment where teaching and learning would have taken place for the instructors in a blended learning environment. The course was set up in such a way that the teachers were engaged in collaborative and social activities where they'll be able to model real life experiences and have a better idea of best practices to use within the e-learning environment. In terms of leadership, the management of the Samjak College should serve as the leading role models for change by motivating the instructors, by motivating the students to keep the program effort successful, to encourage everyone to move forward and see the entire blended learning program as a must, as a benefit, and as an improvement to the teaching and learning at the college. The leadership must be committed, and this is crucial to having the changes that are needed to be successful. So the leadership now simply has to go through a phase where the principal, who is normally seen as an administrator, is now seen as an instructional leader. And that principal now will promote the fundamental notion of blended learning. He would act now as the change agent. So leadership will have played a great role in ensuring to the success of the blended learning program. In terms of educational changes, the college should experience now a more significant buy-in as they move away from the traditional physical instructor-led classroom towards a more constructivist classroom. School culture now will develop where staff members will now collaborate and interact with each other face-to-face as well as online. And they will also have more student-student interaction and will be able to build a larger online community. So if staff members are committed to the reform as introduced, then the culture at the school as well will have to be a bit more conducive to change. They will have to move into a more collaborative culture, which should be nurtured throughout the college, whereby the faculty will gain administrative support, leadership support, and then as well, the instructors can be considered as instructional leaders when they are in their classroom, when they're also in their staff room in terms of assisting other teachers in decision making regarding, for instance, course design or course development, student collaboration, types of assessments, evaluations that can be put online, anything that they have, they can share. So that means now collaboration must be entrenched in the college mission as well as in its governance. But more importantly, it must form part of the culture and the structure of the entire institution if blended learning is to become a successful reform throughout the institution. Cohesion within and among the teachers from the various departments and divisions will also improve institutional effectiveness, create a better service within the organization, and generate efficiency. Here ends my presentation. Any final remarks, questions, comments, queries?
At this time, participants are welcome to enter any questions in the chat and I will present them to our presenter to be answered. Or if preferred, you can go off of mute and ask your question live. We have received a question in the chat. First, the comment of excellent presentation. Due to COVID, what is the state of online learning in the Caribbean?
Okay, so quite recently at I work with most of the tertiary institutions in Barbados, as well as the University of West Indies. So what has happened is that most of the institutions, including secondary schools, for us, we were rushed and forced for some persons into e-learning. We were not fully prepared. The institution on the study that was more prepared than the other institutions simply because they would have begun their implementation in 2013, and within recent times they would have become more successful in so much that they had branded themselves as a blended learning institution. The other tertiary institutions in the country, they not follow suit. They remain face to face, as well as the secondary and high schools. So as COVID emerged, we were kind of rushed into getting activities online, creating online content. So most of the courses now, as it stands, are not fully instructional design. Some are used for note taking, some are used simply for online assignments. Most of the teaching takes place using Zoom. For secondary schools, they are using Google Classroom. For the tertiary institutions, they are using Moodle. So what has happened is the same thing that would have happened years ago at the SJC, where teachers were not trained, but was simply said, as opposed to this being a curriculum reform, it being the only way in which we can now educate the nation's children. So most persons now, even within the entire Caribbean, even at university level, we are now seeing that the face-to-face classes are now trying to be transferred into online setting. So we either have fully online courses, blended courses, or we're just simply using the learning management system as a library, a place to have our notes and where students can access learning material. And then we will complement a lot of our teaching through Zoom meetings or Google Meet or whatever the case may be. But as it stands now, as we realize, countries outside of the Caribbean are now used or adapted to online learning and COVID. But as it stands in the Caribbean now, especially in Barbados, we are now seeing COVID cases on the rise. We are now having at least, I think we have at least 25 persons died from COVID, and for us, that is a lot. So what is happening now is that we are realizing that we really now cannot just be piggybacking on e-learning as a plaster, so to speak, that COVID now is here for a while, it's now hitting us, and therefore we need to get our LMS and our courses designed. And it was reflected in a lot of our standardized testing, or what we call our Caribbean examination certificate. A lot of the results that came back were poor, and it was not simply because of students' knowledge, but more so of students and teachers adapting to the online environment, more so of having to design content to upload, um, also of having to see how can we schedule classes in an online setting which will replicate what goes on in the face-to-face classroom. And then, of course, the whole issue of bandwidth, accessibility to the internet, persons having laptop computers, mobile devices, all of those things came into play. So whereas in the US and the UK, everything may have been streamlined and e-learning is a way of life, for us in the Caribbean, we are now trying to adjust, and we are still uncertain how it will be for us to become a way of life. Our culture are such that interaction is important for us. face-to-face interaction, socializing is part of our culture. Being up and out the house and around the campus, that is part of our culture. So it's becoming difficult, not only in the use of technology, but the whole aspect of staying at home and not being able to socialize and learn through that medium.